What is avian influenza? Avian influenza refers to infection of birds with the avian influenza type A viruses. These viruses occur naturally among wild aquatic birds worldwide and can infect domestic poultry and other birds and animal species. Wild aquatic birds can be infected with avian influenza A viruses in their intestines and respiratory tract, but usually do not get sick. However, avian influenza A viruses are very contagious among birds, and some of these viruses can sicken and even kill certain domesticated bird species, including chickens, ducks, and even turkeys. Infected birds can shed avian influenza A viruses in their saliva, nasal secretions, and feces. Susceptible birds become infected when they have contact with viruses as it's shed by infected birds. These also can become infected through contact with surfaces that are contaminated with viruses from infected birds. Avian influenza A viruses are classified into the following two categories: low pathogenic avian influenza A viruses and highly pathogenic avian influenza A viruses. Infection of poultry with low pathogenic avian influenza viruses may cause no disease or mild illness, such as ruffled feathers and even a drop in egg production, and may not be detected at all. Infection of poultry with high pathogen avian influenza viruses can cause severe disease with high mortality. Both of these viruses can spread rapidly through poultry flocks. However, some ducks can be infected without any signs of illness. Viruses such as these can live on a host for days, if not weeks to months. Avian influenza in wild birds. Avian influenza A viruses have been isolated from more than 100 different species of wild birds. Most of these viruses have been low pathogenic avian influenza viruses. The majority of the wild birds from which these viruses have been recovered represent gulls, terns, and shorebirds, or waterfowl such as duck, geese, and swans. These birds are wild and often viewed as reservoirs or hosts for avian influenza A viruses. Avian influenza in poultry, which are domesticated birds. Domesticated birds such as chickens, turkeys, etc., may become infected with avian influenza A viruses through direct contact with infected waterfowl or other infected poultry, or through contact with surfaces that have been contaminated with the virus. Infection of poultry with low pathogen avian influenza viruses may cause no disease or mild illness and may only cause mild signs. Infection of poultry with high pathogen avian influenza viruses can cause severe disease with high mortality. Both of these viruses can spread rapidly through flocks of poultry. High pathogen avian influenza infection in poultry, such as H5 or H7 viruses, can cause disease that affects multiple internal organs, with mortality up to 90 to 100%, often within 48 hours. Some ducks can be infected without any signs of illness at all. Avian influenza outbreaks are of concern in domesticated birds for several reasons. Some of these reasons are the potential for low pathogenic H5 and H7 viruses to evolve into highly pathogenic viruses. Also, the potential for rapid spread and significant illness and death among poultry during outbreak of highly pathogenic avian influenza. Also, the economic impact and trade restrictions from a highly pathogenic avian influenza outbreak could be transmitted to humans. When these viruses of high pathogen avian influenza H5 or H7 outbreaks occur in poultry, depopulation, or also called culling or stamping out, of infected flocks is usually carried out. In addition, surveillance of flocks that are nearby or linked to the infected flocks, and quarantine of exposed flocks, with culling if disease is detected, are the preferred and control and eradication methods. Introducing Birds Die by Kinsey, Kelby, Reed, and Abdul Rahman. A chicken farmer from Georgia with 16 Tyson contracted broiler houses, 50 foot by 500 feet, went on a week-long duck hunting trip to Alaska, bringing back a mutated version of avian influenza. The farmer got back from his trip on Sunday and went to work on Monday. Appropriately, when he got home he washed all of his clothes and disinfected the bottom of his shoes. However, not abiding by the dwell time combined with the porous nature of rubber on the bottom of his shoes, the virus was not killed. Within 3 days, 90% of the flock was suddenly dead, not showing any symptoms of the virus. This was an accidental introduction of highly pathogenic avian influenza, also known as HPAI. It was transmitted through the infected surfaces of the farmer's boots. The incubation period for this virus is highly variable, ranging from a few days to 2 weeks in a flock. Mortality can be as high as 100% in a few days, with no other symptoms. However, in acute cases, symptoms can be observed as runny nose, coughing, sneezing, diarrhea, stumbling, or falling down, purple discoloration of the wattle, combs, and legs, swelling of the head, eyelids, comb, wattles, and hooks, decreased egg production in soft-shelled or misshapen eggs, and lack of energy and appetite. Within the flock, transmission occurs through bird-to-bird interaction, but airborne secretions are another important means of transmission. Transmission between farms are a result of breaches in biosecurity practices, such as moving infected poultry or contaminated secretions and excretions on equipment or clothing. Domestic pets and other mammals such as rats, mice, ferrets, rabbits, and minks can be a potential transmission vector between farms. Airborne transmission of the avian influenza virus from farm to farm is unlikely. The virus cannot travel long distances through air and is sensitive to sunlight and drying. Depending on environmental conditions, avian influenza can persist in the soil, feces, and pond water for varying amounts of time. Survival of the virus depends on temperatures and humidity. A study done in 1998 showed the stability of Hong Kong H5N1 highly pathogenic virus in wet feces. At 39.2 degrees Fahrenheit, it was stable more than 40 days. The virus becomes less stable as the temperatures increase. At 77 degrees Fahrenheit, the virus was stable for 8 days, and at 95 degrees, only 2 days. Poultry may be the direct target of the virus, but it can be easily carried out into the environment by other mammals and wild birds. The agent or action within this case is airborne, meaning bird to bird within the flock. The virus was spread to neighboring flocks through infected clothing and equipment. Based on the certain results, the biology of the virus, and past incidents, the expected results of this outbreak would be economic losses. Some of this would be once avian flu is confirmed, all birds must be destroyed on the farmer's farm. About 424,000 birds were either killed by the virus or euthanized. In this instance, there is no compensation for the birds that die of the virus, but there is partial compensation for the birds that are euthanized. Loss of production while the operations are closed down is also another factor. Cleaning and disinfecting may take up to 4 to 8 weeks. Layoffs could also be a factor. In order to stop the spread, neighboring farms had to heighten biosecurity measures, meaning more expenditures. The USDA and state officials work to trace the cause of the initial outbreak and implement ways to manage and control the outbreak. All of these will have an overall negative impact on the local economy. Not only that, but the biggest factor of all is the impact it has on the public. Thank you all for your time and listening in to our attack plan. The last slide will show references which we used.